Louis? Are you in Kansas City? Are you somewhere else? But like I said, go ahead as we're getting logged in. We'll give people just a minute here before we get kicked off. Go ahead, drop down into that chat. Let us know where you are calling in from. Nice. Good St. Louis contingent. Oh yeah, we got some construction travelers. Good morning, Michelle. Well, we're going to jump right in because it is 10 o'clock. And I know, well, it's 10 o'clock for me. It's not 10 o'clock for all of us, right? Some of us are in California, Ontario, all over the place. But we have a lot going on today. So we are going to jump right in to the content. Now, we're going to start with none other than a story. Maybe some of you have already read this book, right? The book is called Take Command. Dale Carnegie released this book last year. And we're going to start with one of the stories from the book. Now, this story is about a lady named Leah Gabriel. Maybe you have heard, maybe you have not, but she was incredible. She was very used to just being courageous. She was a fighter pilot. Okay, she was a fighter pilot on board a ship called the USS George Washington. It was a nuclear-powered ship, and what she would do every day was heroic. Okay, nothing short of heroic. She would get into her plane, and she would take off from this ship. Now, we've probably seen Top Gun, right? And it looks pretty easy. They take off and they land on the ship, but this ship, right, it is bouncing up and down on this water, and they go from 0 to 170 miles per hour in about 2 seconds. And so she would do this day in and day out. She did it so often, in fact, that after a period of time, it kind of just became routine. It was easy for her until one day when something happened. Now, this was in November of 2022. And one of her friends, his name was Lieutenant Robert, they called him Trey Kluge. He was an incredible pilot. He was a Top Gun graduate. And they went out for a night mission. And something happened. And they're not sure exactly what happened. But Lieutenant Kluge didn't come back. And so the aircraft carrier, they paused their normal operations. They held a formal memorial at sea, full military honors. And after 3 days, they decided to resume operations. And so Leah climbed back up into the cockpit of that plane. She did her pre-flight briefing. She put on her gear. They lowered the window in front of her. And she knew at that moment that once she gave the thumbs up, and the salute, that she would be off. And she says she had this moment, right? This thing that had almost become routine for her. She thought about it differently then. And here's what she had to say in the book. She said, right, I realized that every single time I have the opportunity to challenge myself and push myself forward, I needed to do it. You realize in those moments, you're only as good as the last time you were challenged. And so as you and I are here today on this call, we all have some challenges. Some of them might be big, some of them might be small, some of them might be work related, some might be professional. But we all have those challenges, and we all have opportunities as well to take command. So welcome to our Take Command event. My name is Liz Haberberger. I am based out of St. Louis, Missouri, here with Dale Carnegie. And so every year, every month, every week, every day, we all have an opportunity. Okay, we have a fresh start. All of us here on this call today, we woke up with a fresh start. We have this opportunity to maybe do some things differently, to set some goals. And so today, we're all going to have an opportunity to take command. We're going to just do some reflecting on what are your goals? What are those things that we want to accomplish? Okay, maybe it's a new job. Maybe it's a promotion. Maybe it's travel. Maybe it's becoming a healthier version of ourselves. But we also have these things that are stopping us. These things that might be holding us back. And so in the next 60 minutes, we're going to explore some of these questions and see if we can all move just a little bit closer to taking command of our lives, both personally and professionally. So let's go ahead and start by just taking a look at the framework. Now, I will tell you what we're going to walk through today is all based on the book that Dale Carnegie released last year called Take Command. So as we're going through this, first, if you say, gosh, where can I learn more about this? This concept is interesting to me. One opportunity you have is to just read the book. Okay, because we're going to look at some of the concepts there. Now, we're going to look at a 3-part model. Now, the first is about taking command of our thoughts and emotions. Second is about taking command in our relationships. And third is about taking command of your future. Now, before we jump into these 3, if any of you have been a part of Dale Carnegie in the past, you know that Dale Carnegie is not just a sit around and listen kind of thing. Okay, it's going to be a get involved type of experience. Now, because we've got a large group here, we're going to be leveraging that chat box a lot. So we're all going to drop down into that chat right now. We're looking at these 3 phases of taking command. And in the chat, which of these 3 most resonate with you? Is it about taking command of your thoughts and emotions? Is it your relationships or your future? So go ahead, drop down into the chat. We'll see if we can see a common trend. Nice for Brandon, right? He put right away in there his future. Precious says future. Wow. Okay, I think I'm seeing a lot on the bookends. Although, then we just got a relationships, right? Josh is in there. Tracy says future. Nice. For Haley, it's thoughts and emotions. Rachel, it's future. So none of us are alone in this. And if we think about why we're talking about this today, it's not just because all of us are resonating with one of these. Ooh, Michelle's making some connections between them. But we're also talking about this because there's actually been a lot of research. Okay, there's been a lot of research with people at the end of their lives. And they'll ask them, what do they regret most? Anybody have any guesses on what is it that they might regret most? If you've got a guess, drop it down in the chat. Okay, because this is, okay, Robert says not making better relationships. Jenna says not doing what they wanted to do. Ooh, Chad says wasting time. Joyce is like, I'm not taking charge or command. Too much time at work. Yeah, all of these are really, really close. Okay, they're probably wrapped up in here somehow. Here's what they found. Okay, this was from Bonnie Ware and some of the research she's done. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life others expected from me. Now, maybe as we look at this, we say, okay, this isn't terribly surprising to anyone here. And I'm also guessing that we don't want to have this thought at the end of our life and say, gosh, I wish that I would have had the courage to live my life. And so we're here today to say, if we can take command of all of these things, our thoughts and emotions, our relationships, and our future, we can have an enormous impact, not just on us, but on the people that we love. So we're going to get started. And of course, the only obvious place to start, the beginning. And for us, the beginning is going to be our thoughts and emotions. So we had a good contingent of people who said, right, this might be the most relevant for them right now. And if we think about it, we can't escape our thoughts and our emotions. They are always with us. Now, Dale Carnegie knew the power of this. Dale Carnegie has written several books. One of the books that he wrote was a book called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. Now, if we think about this concept, our thoughts and emotions, a lot of what we drew on for the book Take Command came from what he wrote in How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And here's one of the things he had to say in that book. Okay, he says, by far, the most vital lesson I have ever learned is the importance of what we think. If I knew what you think, I would know what you are. Our thoughts make us what we are, and our mental attitude is the X factor that determines our fate. And then he went on a little bit. He went on to say this. So go ahead and read through this. And as we read through this, when we're finished, just drop a thought down into the chat. As you heard these two quotes from How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, what resonates? So once we read through that quote, we'll just drop down into the chat. And in looking at those two quick snippets, what resonates? Yes, absolutely. Gretchen says it's simple. It's the simplicity, but simple doesn't mean easy, right? Oh, yes, Eric, perspective, right? I have to do this versus I get to do this. Yeah, Elizabeth, right? We are in control over those things. Oh, Jordan, you're already hitting on something key there, right? How do we recognize those thoughts, those bad thoughts? Martin says, right, we have control in those situations. Absolutely. Yeah, those negative thoughts are going to take us in a direction, whether it's a good direction or a bad direction. Now, I have definitely been there. I came into this business. I've been with Dale Carnegie for 9 years now. And I still remember one of the first times I got hired and I was going to go train at a construction company. Now, this was not like working with the project managers. I mean, I was going to be working with the people who are out on job sites every day, right? In their steel toe boots, their safety vests, and they are out there working with their hands. And I started having all of these thoughts. These thoughts like, they're going to hate me. I am not the right person for this. They're going to look at me and think, what are you going to teach me? You can't do what we can do. You don't understand us. And I found myself getting really worked up in the weeks before the training. And I was nervous. I kept trying to put things together. I would second guess myself. I wasn't sure. And so I was talking to a colleague about it one day, someone who's been a trainer a lot longer than me, worked with many groups. And I was telling her, I'm so nervous about this. I'm unsure. I don't think they're going to like me. And she just looked at me so matter-of-factly and she said, well, Liz, if you don't think you're the right person for this, how do you expect them to? And it was this like moment of, oh my gosh, she's right. If I don't have the right thoughts, how can I expect them to? Now, maybe you had something similar. And so she actually suggested to me, because we work at Dale Carnegie, she's like, why don't you go? She goes, go open How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And so I did. I opened up that book. I started reading and I thought, you know what? He's right. This really isn't about my ability. This is about my thoughts. So we're going to talk about how we can take control of our thoughts and of our emotions. Now, Jordan already hit the nail on the head with the first piece. The very first thing we've got to do is pay attention to them. Okay. How often do we think about what we think? Maybe not quite as often as we should. And so the first step that we have to take, if we want to change that mindset, is we've got to find ways to choose our thoughts and to choose the thoughts that are going to serve us. So we're going to do just a quick little survey here to just see, we're going to spend some time thinking about what we think. Now, I'm going to drop a link in the chat. Now, this link is just to a quick form. Okay, so if you would, go ahead and just click the link in the chat. Now, this form is really simple. Okay, it's only 2 questions, and they are both multiple choice questions. So go ahead down in the chat. Again, you should see the link to that form. Is that link coming through by chance, Andy? Do you see that? Okay, perfect. Yeah, so go ahead. If you click on that form, it's just 2 quick questions, multiple choice. And we'll start to see some results coming through. So again, we often don't think about our thoughts. So we're going to spend just a little time just thinking about our thoughts. Are our thoughts serving us? Are they not serving us? Do we mostly focus on the good? Do we tend to focus on the negative? Now, one of the things we will be doing is sending out the results of this survey, okay, after today. So as we think about our thoughts, again, start to just think, what becomes apparent? What's jumping out at you? Are our thoughts helpful to us? Or are our thoughts hurting us? Right? I think back to my scenario. My thoughts were definitely not helpful to me. Okay. I was looking at the worst in that situation. But if we're not aware of it, right, we can't change those thoughts. But just imagine what might happen in your life if we could change some of those undermining thoughts, some of those things that aren't serving us. So taking command is really about reframing. Okay, how can we reframe some of those thoughts? Now, the first thing that we have to do, right, we said, is that we have to actually just pay attention to those thoughts. We've got to pay attention. And then we want to start to notice. Okay, start to notice some of those limiting thoughts. When we're paying attention and we notice those, we want to view that as a warning. Okay, that's our early detection signal. In your car, right, there's a little thing that pops up and it'll say, well, it doesn't say check engine always, okay, but it pops up and it pops up for a reason. I remember being 16, right, in my first car driving around. And one time I got back in the car, I turned the key, I didn't have a push, right? You turned the key, and all of a sudden this thing blinked on my dashboard. And I thought, why is there a submarine on the dashboard of this car? And so I called my dad and I said, Dad, why is there's like a little submarine light here? What is that for? And he said, Elizabeth, that's not a submarine. That's your check engine light. You've got to take it in. And sure enough, I took in the car, and thank goodness I did, right? Because if I hadn't, I'd have been stuck out on the highway pretty soon. So we want to pay attention and notice those thoughts. That's that check engine light. And then what we want to do is then practice choosing the right. Okay, we want to choose those right thoughts by reframing them and focusing on the good. We had so many things dropping into the chat earlier, right? People were telling us about the importance of how we speak to ourselves and focusing on the good, because that's what we can control. So we're going to put this into practice just a little bit. Now, if you have a pen and paper with you, great. If you don't have a pen and paper with you, you can jot this down, right? If you're a OneNote user, you can do it there. But let's all think about one undermining thought. One thought we have that might be holding us back from something important. Okay, something that, like, if we changed it, it could actually make a meaningful difference. Now, I'll give you some examples of some common undermining thoughts, and then we'll take about 60, 90 seconds to think through one for ourselves. Okay, oftentimes people will say things like, maybe it was like I did, like, I'm too young for this. Some people might say, I'm too old to do this. Some people might say, gosh, it's almost that imposter syndrome. I'm afraid people are going to find out I don't really know what I'm doing. Maybe it's comparison. Well, I'm not as good as this, or I don't have as much confidence as other people. I could never do that. What is yours? Now just think through what that is and either write it down on a piece of paper, write it down in OneNote, wherever you want to write it. Okay, but what was one example of an undermining thought that you have that doesn't serve you in any way, shape, or form? And then once we've got that thought written down, one of the nice things about being on a call like this is that we can actually hear from almost everyone. Okay, down in the chat, we can get some ideas flowing. So once we've got one, let's go ahead and put that thought in the chat. Now, I'm not going to just call anybody off of mute, so don't worry, you won't have to pop off mute if you don't want to. But let's start by just dropping down into the chat. Just jotting down, what are some of those undermining thoughts that you might be having? We'll see what we can get going down in the chat. Thinking about those undermining thoughts. What are some of those undermining thoughts that we might be having? Nice. Yes. Overanalyzing, I keep seeing this kind of theme, right? Not good enough is popping up a lot. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to get ignored anyway. Too old. Okay, I don't have anything unique or special. My guess is as we're looking at some of these things coming through in the chat, we're probably seeing some things and thinking, huh, like that resonates with me too. Yes. Okay, so now we're going to see if we can do what we said earlier. Okay, we're going to pay attention to these things. We're going to notice these thoughts. Now think about that thought. Okay, that undermining thought. How might you reframe that? Right? Instead of saying, man, I'm too young. I'm too young to do this. I'm not ready. Maybe we reframe that and we say, I'm going to bring a fresh perspective. Okay, people are going to be excited for new ideas. And let's just do the same thing down in the chat. Okay, we've got all these potentially negative thoughts. Let's see if we can reframe some of those thoughts. How might we do that? Yes, Roz, I love it, right? I'm gonna rock this out. Absolutely. Yes, I have a fresh perspective. Jen, I love it. If I fail, it's a lesson. Oh, I'm going to focus on what I know versus what I'm creating. Yeah, Robert, my thoughts hold a valuable perspective. Joanne says it right, doesn't matter what other people think. I'm going to try my best. Kristen, absolutely. I'm an agent for change. Yeah. Look at some of the ways we're already starting to be able to flip these thoughts. Now, one thing I noticed, this one's a lot harder for us. Okay, it's a lot easier for us to say, here's those negative thoughts going on in my mind. Yeah, what if in a positive? Yeah, versus negative. Absolutely. I bring experience to the table. Okay, there's something so, oh, Amber, absolutely, right? They wouldn't have asked me to be here if I wasn't great at this. Yeah. This ability to choose our thoughts, right? Dale Carnegie says that's the X factor that people can bring to situations. So we've got one idea already flowing, okay, for choosing the right thoughts and choosing those emotions. Challenge you this week to just pay attention. Can we pay attention to our thoughts? Are those thoughts serving us or hurting us? Now, if we do that, if we're paying attention to the thoughts, it actually starts to make the second part of this framework a little bit easier. Because once we've taken command of our thoughts and emotions, then we get to go out just a little bit. And then second part of the framework, okay, we're going to focus on taking command of our relationships. Now, there are so many ways we can take command in our relationships. we're going to focus in on one key way to do that today, and that's with the idea of ditching criticism. Now, I told you Dale Carnegie's written a couple books. Okay, Take Command was the most recent book that Dale Carnegie, the company, released. Dale Carnegie, the man, wrote several books as well. One was How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. The first book he wrote was called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And in How to Win Friends and Influence People, he talks a lot about criticism. And what he says is that instead of just condemning them, let's try to understand them. So it's a whole lot more profitable and intriguing than criticism because it breeds sympathy, tolerance, and kindness. So first, let's just think about what's the difference, okay, between criticism and feedback, because those are two different things. So just drop down in the chat for a moment. What are some thoughts on the difference? Criticism and feedback, okay? Now, this could be in any type of relationship. Elizabeth quickly put empathy down there in the chat, but maybe it's a relationship with your manager. It could be a relationship with some peers, with clients. It could be a relationship with a spouse or a friend. Okay, ooh, yes, Sarah says one's intended to help. Aha, feedback's helpful, criticism tears down. Yeah, feedback looks to help. Absolutely. We are spot on in thinking, okay, right, the difference between feedback and criticism. And so if we really think about taking command in our relationships, we're going to focus on feedback versus criticism. So we're going to look at just a couple thoughts, a couple things we can keep in mind here, because part of any good relationship, strong relationship, is being able to have both the good and the bad. And so we've got to learn how to take that criticism from other people, learn from it, and change and improve. But in the end, we've got to figure out how to just ditch the negative criticism. So first thing that we're going to talk about, okay, is that criticism focuses on what's wrong. Like, why can't you be on time for once? Feedback then focuses on how we can improve. Gosh, what can we do to help you be more timely? Dale Carnegie has a lot to say, okay, on criticism. In How to Win Friends and Influence People, it's actually the #1 principle that he wrote. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. He says that criticism, it's destructive, it's judgmental. It only focuses on what's wrong. Whereas feedback, and some people call this constructive criticism, okay, but feedback is actionable, it's collaborative, it recognizes an issue and then says, how do we work through this? So now think about this for just a moment. How often do we give criticism? How often are we focusing on what's wrong instead of on how to improve, right? Are we focused on people's shortcomings, or are we focused on how we can learn and grow together? Right? Russ says too often, right? My guess is that a lot of us have that. It is something we have called a negativity bias. Okay, there's a lot of psychology, there's a lot of sociology that goes along with this. I love it. Robert says, right, more than I admit, I do it without even knowing it. Yeah, that's why we started with taking command of our thoughts, right? Our thoughts and our emotions. Next piece on criticism, right? Criticism implies a personal shortcoming. It's about who you are. Well, you're just lazy. You're uneducated. You don't care. Whereas feedback focuses on behaviors, okay, not personality. My guess is you've probably heard this before when you're giving constructive feedback, right? We want to focus on the problem, not on the person. Now, we always say when we're giving appreciation, we want to go the exact opposite. When we're giving appreciation, focus on who they are, not just what they did. But when we're criticizing someone, we're really talking about who they are versus on what they do. Now, the last piece that we'll look at here, last tip on criticism, okay, I say criticism devalues someone while feedback is encouraging. There's a big difference, okay? I always say at the end of the day, a critique, is it meant to break you or is it meant to build you? And if we're doing it to break someone, we're devaluing them. You can't handle this. You're not ready. Or is it encouraging, right? Let's figure out how to do this. You've never done it before, but we can figure this out together. Now, thinking about these, now maybe you're looking at the criticism side, maybe you're looking at the feedback side, but which one of these would you say this would be one important for me to keep in mind? Maybe we say, gosh, I do a lot of focusing on what's wrong. and I need to focus on how to improve. Maybe you say, I need to remember to focus on the behavior, not on the person. But as you look at these, which one for you is one that you say, I need to keep this one in mind? Just drop that in the chat. Let's see where we're at. So one, when you think about your relationships, now sometimes what we find is that in different relationships, it's different. Sometimes people say, you know what, in my professional life, I do a great job on focusing how to improve, but in my personal life, with my husband or my wife or my friends, I tend to focus on what's wrong. Yeah, feedback is generally more productive. 100% agreed. Yes, Gretchen, teenagers, that would be another one, right? Yes. Yeah, teenagers are challenging at times. So if I think about people who deal with a lot of criticism and do it really well, and some who do not do it really well, but people in the public eye, right? People in the public eye, they get a lot of criticism. Now, whether you are thinking politicians, movie stars, musicians, you know, for a lot of them, gosh, it doesn't matter what they do, there's going to be people criticizing them. But there's a really interesting way that some people handle this criticism. I don't know if anyone is a Jimmy Kimmel fan or anybody ever watches the Jimmy Kimmel show, but he does a segment on his show called Mean Tweets. Just down in the chat, yes or no, has anybody ever seen the mean tweets that he does? Okay, a couple of us have seen them. Some of us have not seen them. All right, so basically, yes, they're a little funny. But what he does is he will bring on celebrities. Okay, here's a couple examples. He brings some celebrities on there, and then he basically has them read mean tweets that other people wrote about them. Okay, now if we look at a lot of these, my guess is we're going to say, oh yeah, there's some criticism. These people did not follow the guidelines for feedback, right? This is not feedback. This is not constructive. This is just mean. Now, there are some people who say, you know what, gosh, I can take that criticism and I do it well, right? They find ways to move through that criticism. Christian Bale, he's famous for saying, you know, if you have a problem with me, call me. And if you don't have my number, that means you don't know me well enough to have a problem with me. But finding ways to deal with that criticism, okay, and say, you know what, even if people are going to criticize me, how can I take that? And even if someone's trying to devalue me, even if someone's trying to focus on what's wrong, can I focus on growth? Can I focus on what's good? So some of these, again, they're a little funny when he has them read these, right? But it's a great way for these celebrities to deal with some criticism. Now, think about in your real life. Okay, we're not doing mean tweets to people, but we all have those relationships, right? Where we said we're focusing on the negative. We're focusing on what's wrong. We're doing more criticism sometimes than feedback. What advice would you tell someone else, right? Maybe think about a peer or a colleague. If they came to you and they felt like they were getting mean tweets, a lot of criticism from someone, what advice would you have for them? If you had someone come to you and they said, right, I feel like I'm getting criticism. I've got mean tweets coming at me. What advice would you give to someone? Yeah. Yes. Your friends know the truth, ignore those other people, right? What they think does not define who I am. Absolutely. What else might we tell those people? If someone came to you and said, right, like, I feel like I'm getting a lot of criticism from people. Oh, ask them a question, right? Dig deeper. Yeah, Sarah, absolutely. Yep. They don't know you. Let it be. Yeah, if they're not willing to help, don't pay attention. Oh, Reynard. Yes, take some of what applies and then leave the rest. Now, the question is, as we think about these, do we ever need to give this advice to ourselves? Sometimes when we think about, Kenny says yes, right? Sometimes it's easier to think about other people, right? When other people are dealing with criticism, here's what I would tell them. But sometimes we struggle with that ourselves. And so you can scroll back up in that chat, look for a couple of those pieces of advice, and maybe there's a relationship right now where you need to remind yourself of that thing. Now, a couple strategies, okay, a couple things we can also do, especially we can focus on ditching the criticism in those relationships. Here's 3 thoughts. Now, this first one ties directly back to the first piece we looked at, assume positive intent. Are our thoughts, are our emotions positive, or are we assuming that the other person is trying to criticize? When we assume positive intent, we're more likely to see the positive or see the good. In those relationships, we want to really focus on being a good listener. Sometimes we get into relationships and we think it's win-lose. I have to be right and someone has to be wrong. Let's just try to understand. When we can understand, that's when we can get out of criticize mode and move more into feedback mode. And then finally, this is one of Dale Carnegie's principles: give honest, sincere appreciation. It's important that it's sincere, okay? But here's the thing. If we're really paying attention to someone, if we're really trying to understand their perspective, if we're assuming positive intent, we can almost always find something that we can sincerely appreciate about them. So now let's think again, okay? We thought of something on the first one. We thought of one thought that's not serving us. We said, how can it serve us? Second piece to look at. Now think about one important relationship in your life. Maybe it's a personal relationship. Maybe it's a professional relationship. Maybe it already popped in your mind as we were talking about criticism versus feedback. But what's one relationship? It doesn't have to be a bad one. It could be a relationship where you say it's actually a pretty good relationship, but I think it could be even stronger. What's one thing that you could do, even within the next 24 hours? Now, maybe it's going back to some of those tips right here. Maybe we say, you know what? I need to actually listen more, or show them appreciation, or assume positive intent. Yeah, Kristen, in the chat, someone's talking about love languages. Okay, so when we're talking about giving appreciation, honest and sincere appreciation, which means we've got to know who they are, right? We have to have listened. We have to really understand them and not just think about ourselves. So take about another 60 seconds, okay, just to think through, what's that relationship in your life? A relationship that's important. And what's one thing that you could do, even just in the next 24 hours, to just move the needle a tiny bit? Nice. I love it. Some people are dropping it in the chat. That works. If you're just jotting it down on your own piece of paper, that works as well. Yes. Okay. It's often not the big things we do that make the biggest impact. It's the small things we do consistently that are going to make the biggest impact on our relationships. So we've got the first two. Okay. We talked about taking command of our thoughts and emotions, paying attention to those thoughts, getting rid of those thoughts that don't serve us and focusing on the ones that do. We talked about building relationships, taking command in our relationships by focusing not on criticism, maybe on feedback. So now we're going to look at the final piece in this take command framework about taking command of our future. Okay, before we go future though, we're going to go past for a second. Now think about the last decade, okay, the last 10 years of your life. I don't care what age you are, but think about the last 10 years of your life. On a scale of 1 to 10, and we'll do this down in the chat, how much would you say you've changed? 1 says none at all. 10 says I've changed a whole lot. What number would you put on, in the last decade, how much would you say you've changed? Johnny put a 12. Penny's at an 8. Joyce is at a 7. Alan's at a 5. Okay, I'm seeing, yep, got it. Haley's at a 10. Okay. Martin's at a 5. Perfect. All right, now let's not go backward facing. Now let's look forward. Think about in the next 10 years. Okay, we've changed a lot, right? We figured a lot out in this last decade. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you anticipate changing in the next decade? Okay, same thing. Scale of 1 to 10, how much do you anticipate changing? Okay, so I'm seeing quite a range still, right? Williams at a 10. I'm seeing a couple 6s, 5, 8s. So there's actually been research where they'll ask people these same 2 questions. And here's what they find is that regardless of age, okay, they've asked people this in their 20s all the way through their 80s. And what they find is that looking back, people say, oh, I've changed a lot. I've changed a lot in the last decade. And then when they say, okay, now think about the next decade, how much do you anticipate changing? And they say less, not as much as I already have. So there's this huge gap. Now, remember, this is true at all ages. So people in their 30s feel like, boy, I did change a lot in my 20s. Now I've got it figured out. I'm not changing too much. And people in their 60s said the same thing. Boy, in my 50s, I changed a lot, but now I've got it figured out. Well, we all have an opportunity, okay, to take command of our future, because what we find, again, at any age is that there's going to be change. And so instead of just letting that change happen to us, how can we take command of that? So when we take command of that, what happens is we actually anticipate the change. We anticipate the growth, right? Yeah, I know nobody, I think at any age really has it figured out. But we're going to talk about how we can take command of our future. I had a conversation with someone recently, and he was talking about some things in his personal life and some choices that he had made. And he said, kind of jokingly about one, he said, well, yeah, I know I've been doing this thing. He goes, yeah, but that's going to be future Matt's problem. And if we think about this, how often do we do this, right? Maybe it's just even in a day. We get to the end of the day, we put something off, we've got a big project, and we kind of say, well, that's future Liz's problem. I don't want to do it now. That's going to be tomorrow Liz's problem. Well, taking command means, gosh, I want to take command of my future so I can live the life that I want, not just the life someone's telling me I have to live, right? Or the kind of life that just passes me by. Now, this idea connects really deeply to the core of Dale Carnegie. It's about vision. It's about intentionality and how we can really be proactive. Now, so far, we've talked about taking command of our thoughts, of our relationships. So now we're going to talk about looking forward and looking forward into our future. So pursuing our purpose, right? Creating a vision for your life is so important if we want to live an intentional life. But what does that really mean? Okay, we've probably heard this before, this idea of intention or living with purpose. It's like, how do I do that? Okay, well, really, at the end of the day, it goes Simon Sinek, knowing your why. Why are we doing things? What drives us? What is it that we want to accomplish? It's about taking control of that, making a conscious decision about our life, what we do and what we don't do, what contribution we want to make. And so to do this, we've got to first just step back. Now we've got to think about our values, our goals, our priorities. Now, my guess is many of you have been to a Starbucks before. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I've been to many Starbucks before. And in 2020, I was having coffee with a gentleman named Matthew Porter. Now, Matthew Porter, he's started several great businesses in St. Louis. And I was sitting down with Matthew and we were talking. And we weren't just talking business, we were kind of talking life. And Matthew said something to me sitting at that Starbucks. He said, Liz, well, at the end, like, what are you building this business for? What do you want? And I thought, I don't know, Matthew, I'm not 100% sure. And so he started talking to me, not about his business vision, but he started talking to me about his family. And he started talking to me about how several years prior, him and his wife had gotten together and they put together a family mission statement. And he said, well, my kids know it, and it helps guide our decisions. It makes us say, here's why we're doing this thing. Here's why we're not doing this thing. And I left so inspired that I said, we got to have this. I want a family mission statement. And so we went back, right? My husband and I, we sat down and we started talking about, well, what do we want? We put together a family mission statement. And so we have a family mission statement to always leave people and places better than we found them. And it's something now that we have above our mantle, but my kids know it, right? If you ask my kids, Well, what's our family mission statement? Always leave people and places better than we found it, right? That's usually the tone that I get, right? When we're leaving somewhere and I say, hey, let's clean up, right? But they know why we're doing it. So we came up with this family mission statement. And then we came up with values, right? Who did we want to be as a family? For us, it's respectful, responsible, confident. We want to have fun in what we're doing. But if I hadn't sat with him in that Starbucks that day, I don't know if I really would have put this into practice, right? In the way that I have now. And my guess is that if I asked you, right, what's your family mission statement? What's your personal vision? What do you value? Many of us would probably say, oh, I don't know, I kind of have some thoughts. Well, we're going to take command of our future today. And so we're going to take a little bit of time to just start thinking about us personally. Now, we're not going to go family today. We don't have to go business today. We're just going to think about some personal values that we really want to embody going forward. Now, I'm going to drop another link in the chat here. Now, you could find lots of articles, okay, lots of different things. This is one article. I'm actually going to pull it up as well. So I'm going to pull it up on the screen here so we can see it. But the way we're going to do this is we're just going to take, I don't know, about 2 minutes. Okay, we'll take about 2 minutes. If you scroll down in this article, okay, you're going to start to see a list. Now there's 150 words here. Now this website is called Good, Good, Good. Okay, so that's why it says good personality traits to describe good people. There's probably other words that could be on this list. All right, this is one that's going to get us started today. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of time to just look through this list. Okay, look through this list and pick 3 to 5 words that as you look through this list, you say, ooh, I want somebody to say that about me in the future, right? I want people to say, man, she's confident. I want people to say, right, she's determined or dependable. I want them to say she's energetic or encouraging. But we're going to take just a couple minutes to just run through this list and just pick 3 to 5 words. Now, you don't have to drop them in the chat. Okay, just write them down. We're going to get them up here another way. So just write down 3 to 5 words that as you look through, you say, yeah, that one resonates with me. I want that word to be said about me. So 3 to 5 words. We'll see what we can come up with. And if someone just dropped in the chat, right, they're like, I didn't see assertive. If there's a word that you're thinking of that's not on this list, use it. Okay, the only reason I'm putting this here is because sometimes we need something to get us started. So if you want a word that's not on this list, by all means, use that word. So again, we're thinking into the future. Right? These are those things that you say, these are important to me. We think back to that biggest regret that people often have, right? They say, gosh, one of the biggest regrets I have is not living the life I wanted to live. I was doing what other people wanted. Well, these words are about what we want. So what are those words for you? Now, as we're looking through this list, we're writing down 3 to 5 words. We're going to do one final thing up here on the screen together, okay? And that is to put in 2 of those words. So you wrote down 3 to 5, okay? You might still be looking, that's okay. We're going to pick our 2 favorite, okay? Pick our 2 favorite. Now, I just dropped one more link in the chat. So you can either go to this link. You could also, if you want to pull out your cell phone, if you go to the website, okay, it's right there at the top of the screen. It's just menti.com. And then you're going to put in that 8-digit code, okay, 79921306. Put in one word, hit submit, and then you're going to put in your second word and hit submit. Yes, see what's going to start happening here? Okay, now it's okay if you pick the same word as somebody else. Totally fine, all right? But in looking through that list, right, we started with 3 to 5 and saying, what are your top 2? And we'll give people, I don't know, a little bit of time here. put in what are those top 2 words for you. Now, what you will start to notice, okay, is that as these words are coming in, you might notice some words getting a little bigger, some words getting a little smaller. If you notice a word getting bigger, all that means is that more people are choosing that same word. So genuine, authentic, trustworthy, compassionate, humble, those are some words that probably more than one person have selected so far. Okay, it's not good or bad. Why? Because it's you. You get to choose how you want to take command of your future and where you want to be, who you want to be. Okay, so don't worry if you say, nobody else is picking my word. It looks small. It doesn't matter. It's your word, not theirs. So we'll take, keep throwing those words in there, right? Identifying which 2 would you say are most important for you, right? Which 2 really resonate for you. And then the important thing, okay, if I would have sat in that Starbucks that day with Matthew Porter and he talked to me about that and I said, oh, that's a cool idea. And I would have thought about a family mission statement. If I would have thought about some words, okay, I have 4 words. Mine are tenacious, capable, radiant, and bold. Okay, if I would have thought about those words and then walked out of Starbucks and never thought about them again, that's not me taking command of my future. So whatever 2 words we just wrote down, okay, you put into that Mentimeter. Now, maybe you say it's those 2, but I also like the other couple I wrote down. This is your opportunity. Write it on a Post-it note. Put it on a note in your phone. Take a dry erase marker after this, right? Go put it on your mirror in the bathroom. But this is an opportunity for us to take command of our future. To not just say, oh, it would be kind of nice if maybe someday, but for us to say, who do I want to be? What are the things I value and I care about? And then let me think about those things. Let me remind myself of those things. Because just like I now have that mission statement in my house, it now helps me make decisions. It now helps me decide what I'm going to do, what I'm not going to do, or how I'm going to act in certain situations. Well, we can all do that same thing. Now, we've got some words started, okay? Some of those things we say, this is who I would like to be, but it's like, why? Why does that matter? Well, let's all think about one goal. Maybe it's something you've been putting off, but you think, man, if I could do that this year, me 10 years from now, me 20 years from now is going to be so grateful that I did. What is that thing for you? Maybe it's a thing simply just having a difficult conversation that you've been wanting to say for a long time. Maybe for you, that thing is putting your name in the hat for a promotion. Maybe that thing for you is something personal, right? It's running a marathon. It's getting back into the gym. But what is one thing that maybe you've been putting off, but you say, gosh, if I did it this year, that would have an impact on my future. That would be me taking command. Again, you've got an opportunity right now, one more time, to drop down into the chat. What might be that thing for you? Oh, yes, right? Now, whether that's hiring a coach for yourself or you getting into coaching, right? Either one of those. Yeah, absolutely. What else are some of those things you say, gosh, I've been putting this off for one reason or another, but man, if I could do that. Yeah, right? Getting into journaling, writing, yes, going back to school, right? Making a career change again, or maybe it's that promotion. Whatever that thing is for you, now think about your 2 words, or your 3, or your 4, right? Somewhere between 2 to 5 words. Think about those words and how those words would help us to take command of that thing. Right? If it's saying, okay, gosh, you know what I really want to do this year is I want to go back to school. Well, if one of those words, right, that you picked was adventurous, how does that word help us there? If the word was bold, how would it help? When we really take the time to think, not just about what we want to do, but about those words for who do we want to be as a person, and then say, how is that going to help me with this? That's us taking command of our future. Now, my guess is that some of us are thinking, oh, maybe I've got some additional questions. Maybe I want some more stuff that can help me as I'm either taking command of myself, as I'm taking command of my relationships, or of my future. So we're going to leave you today with some additional resources. Now, one resource that people often ask for are the slides. Okay, so I will tell you in the link I just dropped in the chat. If you want the slides, just pop in there, okay? You can click a button that says, give me the slides. We will make sure you get the slides from today's event. I did say there is a whole book, right? We wrote a book called Take Command. So if you're interested in the book, right, you can find it at takecommand.com. If you want to get connected with me, that QR code just takes you to my LinkedIn page. I always tell people, I'm like, I post a lot of stuff on there. So if you want to follow me there, great. If you also want, you can just reach out to me there, right? Any questions you have, we're always happy to help. So thinking about some of these additional resources, right? Some of the things that you can use to go forward to help you take command, whether it's of your thoughts, your relationships, or in your future. Now, we looked at all three of these today. The question now is, what will you do? Okay, how are you going to take command? And I think back to Leah Gabriel. We talked about her at the very beginning today. And I think back about how she started taking for granted that, like, well, of course, her friend, right, Lieutenant Kluge passed away, but like, yeah, she was going to keep flying. But the thing was, she didn't have to. She didn't have to. She could have said, you know what? This isn't for me. I can't do this anymore. That's too, I don't want to go back. She could have just gotten out of that plane and quit. But she didn't. Because that wasn't who she was as a person. She looked inside and she decided that day in the plane to give the thumbs up and the salute and to be off. We all have a moment in our lives where we can make that decision. We can make that decision to take command, whether that's our thoughts, our relationships, or our future. So how are you going to take command? Thank you all so much for being here on this call today. Hopefully you've got an opportunity now where you know, right? This is how I'm going to take command. So again, thank you for being here. We're happy to stay on for a little bit if anybody wants to stay, if you've got questions for us. But like I said, I'll drop that link one more time in the chat to the forum. So if you want any of the slides, feel free to go click the box. We'll make sure you get those. If not, have a great rest of your day, an awesome week, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye, everybody. Oh, hi, Johanna. Johanna, I didn't even see you on here.